Sherry, here we are, our very first quarterly episode of our new series we're calling Ask Lara. And you know what that means?
You're not going to be the only one talking.
That's right. Lara's here with us, back again on the Intoxicated podcast. Is Lara Hammock. She is a licensed clinical social worker, licensed in Virginia, Maryland, and Washington, D.C., and a mental health therapist. Lara works with adults, both individuals and couples, working through the impacts of anxiety, depression, ADHD, addiction, obsessive compulsive disorder, bipolar disorder, trauma, and relationship issues. She's also a friend, and she's got a great sense of humor. And so we want to include Lara in our unimportant world observations before we get to the nitty gritty. Are you up for that, Lara?
I am up for it.
Okay, great. So we're going to, as lightheartedly as possible, tell our listeners that we just got back from a funeral. Sadly, Sherry, your mother passed. And it was a really rough week. But there were some observations that we want to share, or that I want to share, and that you're going to hear me share. But I've shared them with you already. That wasn't very smooth. So
you think people listen because you're smooth?
Not known for smoothness. So we're going from the funeral home where the service took place to the burial site, the graveyard. I don't know. How do you say that nicely?
Cemetery. What it's called.
To the hole in the ground. We're going out there to the cemetery. And of course, there's a hearse in the front, and we've all got our flashers on. And I was shocked to see everybody pull over that was oncoming traffic coming at us. And we were like, so we were in town for a few minutes, and then we took, we were in southern Indiana on Country Highway. They call them 2 lanes, right? Where inexplicably the speed limit is still 55, even though there's windy corners and it's a narrow road. But like semis pulled over. There was a big dump truck that pulled over when they saw us coming. And I was just wildly impressed, because when we see a funeral procession here in Denver, nobody gives a rip. Cars are trying to get, in between cars that are in the procession. The oncoming traffic wouldn't even think about pulling over. But that was really, really respectful. And it was moving. It was actually, it teared me up.
Yeah. Yeah. Our cousin from Bozeman said the same thing. She was really moved and tore up thinking of that level of respect. And I always felt like it was maybe a small town sort of thing, because, I grew up in that area and we had lots of family that stayed in that area. So lots of people passed away, and that's just kind of what we did.
One of your uncle cousins said, I said, "How are you doing?" He's like, "Well, I'm here about every week," meaning the funeral home. So
yeah,
he has a good sense of humor.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting that maybe certain parts of the country that's just not ever thought of.
What do you think, Lara? Does that surprise you that not just the people let us pass through that were going our same direction, but the oncoming traffic pulled over? Would you expect to see?
I've never seen that before. That's not the custom in my neck of the woods, and certainly not where I live now, which is pretty, urban, suburban. But it reminds me of the story that a client told me recently, when he was and he went to Catholic school, but when he was in elementary school, he had an art teacher who every time an ambulance went by, she had the whole class pray for who was in the ambulance. And as he was telling me, this is a guy that I've been seeing for a while, and he has never choked up, and he choked up about it. And I think it's just that it's just for 1 second to honor what other people are experiencing, and to do it in a way that impacts your day, that inconveniences you, that makes you take a pause. But that's the same feeling that I get about people pulling over for a funeral procession as praying for the ambulance as it goes by.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That's very similar to why I think it hit me, where we live in such a toxic time where there's such divide. And, it wasn't like the oncoming traffic cared what political affiliation Sherry's mom had or anyone in the procession.
They didn't know at all who was in the back of the hearse.
It was like this little crumb of evidence that we can still be connected on a human, we're all citizens of the same country/planet. that level, and you don't see it anywhere else. So it was like, it was really moving. Yeah. Very much like the ambulance story. Okay, I got more funeral banter. As I think our listeners, I know if you listen to our episodes in sequence, then you heard a pretty heartfelt episode last week talking about the processing of Sherry's mom's passing. So one of the things we want to accomplish with this introductory conversation is we want our listeners to know that we are making progress through the grieving process, and that's why we're able to recount little funny little tidbits from what happened. And so you're doing okay, yeah?
Yeah.
As well as could be expected this far out.
Right.
Excellent. Well, so after the burial, we went to a little country church, little tiny town, and they threw a little luncheon for the attendees. Is that what you call it?
Said,
dinner, luncheon?
You just called that town. Wow, this is much bigger than I anticipated.
Well, I thought it had like 20 people in it, so it was bigger than that.
Matt just thinks that I grew up in Podunk. So yes, it was a church that's a well-attended church that was by my grandmother and my mom, and actually I was baptized there. But that
was terrifying for me to witness.
There was a dinner, they served food, and these were people that my mother like went to church with, and so they had a dinner, and
so there's these four like old church ladies. I don't know how else to say that. That's what they were. Okay. That might be insulting, but that's what they were, old church ladies. And they were preparing dinner for us. And when we came in, I went like scorching past because I had to go to the bathroom down this hallway. And I went right by the little kitchen area. And I swear, Laura, I saw a woman with tongs dipping the tongs into a fry pot and pulling out a piece of chicken. And I went scurrying off to the bathroom thinking, oh my God, we're having not just fried chicken, but like homemade fried chicken by white-haired church ladies. Like how could that possibly taste any better than this is going to taste? This is so cool. Well, that's what they made us.
Really excited. It wasn't funeral ham.
Yeah, every time.
That's kind of the tradition in the area I grew up with in the Midwest I-states. It's ham.
Right. I was excited.
So he was like, yes, chicken.
So we have our dinner, and I had 3 pieces of chicken. I'm not going to lie. I was so excited about what I thought was homemade fried chicken. And I went up to the little kitchenette area to thank the church ladies at the end. And the pot was still sitting there. And I said, I cannot believe how delicious that was. I cannot believe you guys made us fresh fried chicken. And all 4 of them started laughing. And they said, oh, honey, that wasn't fresh. That was grocery store fried chicken. And I said, what are you talking about? I saw you getting it out of that pot right there. And the woman looks at me and she says, oh, honey, do you not know how a crock pot works? And it turns out they were just keeping the grocery store chicken in a crock pot to keep it warm. And I thought that was a fryer, but it was just one of those like round 1970s crock pots. Yeah.
I also am so impressed with your inability to smell. Like you would have been able to smell.
I didn't think of that till later. Yeah.
So when you told me that when we were eating, I just
it wasn't very warm.
So yeah. So maybe we'll get Laura's take on this. When he told me this, I had 2 of my cousins and my cousin's wife were sitting at the table, and he was like, they have homemade fried chicken. And I was like, sure, whatever. And I just ignored that statement, hoping everybody else would, because we all knew it was just from the grocery store.
It was from Babs.
It was the local grocery store.
Yeah. Babs Super Value. Been there 1,000 times.
Yeah.
That's where now that I don't drink anymore, that's where I would escape to when we were visiting Sherry's family. I can't go to the bar, so I'm going to go to Babs. Surely we need a loaf of bread.
Surely, God, somebody.
We've got to be out of milk.
But I was just like, I was grieving, and it was a hard day. And I was like, God, he's not that stupid.
Yep.
You would smell it. You would smell the fryer, you'd smell
or hear it. It's like, it makes a noise.
Exactly.
Oh, thanks, Laura. Thanks for adding that there are other senses.
Yeah, like there's a lot of sensory things you weren't picking up on there, Matt.
My fingers might have been like a little burny when I picked up that drumstick too, I thought about that later. Little residual oil on the outside of the fried chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I knew it was the grocery store because I had just been there a couple weeks before in an empty house when I was packing up the rest of my mom's items. So I kind of knew it was, I had had that familiar taste of fried chicken recently. So I knew it was the grocery store.
Speaking of
Yeah.
familiar, listeners, if you think Laura's voice sounds familiar, that's because she's been on the podcast before. Most recently, episode 312, which was titled Complain Constructively with Laura Hemmick. And after you're done listening to this episode, I know you will be jonesing for more, Laura. And I want to encourage you to go back and listen to that episode because it was a great one. This is the first, as we said, in a quarterly series where we have asked listeners to send in questions to us that we can present to Laura. We got a lot of great questions. I have to say, though, a lot of them were like theoretical questions. You'll be able to hear that. Like, right from the top, when you hear the first question, you'll be, oh, we're asking about therapy theory. In a way that might not make sense, but you'll
They're
understand what you hear.
broader. They're like a broader generalized.
What I want to encourage listeners to give us going forward is the kind of question that you would write in saying, asking for a friend. Like, this isn't really my problem. I'm asking for a friend. And since it's going to be anonymous and we will not divulge, obviously, if you email me, I'm going to see your email address, but I will delete it. I will not divulge it to anyone. We won't out you.
You'll forget who it was from anyhow.
So we want those. Yeah. Sorry.
I was just going to say, obviously you can't tell the difference between fresh fried chicken and chicken that's been sitting in a crock pot. So I don't expect you to.
I don't think you're helping people's confidence in me.
It's going to be like, oh, that's a good question. There you go. And then you're going to write it down. You're going to delete the email and there's done.
That's right.
I mean, you're not going to know who it's from.
Yeah. So send us those embarrassing questions that you would say asking for a friend. Let's dive right in. Are you ready, Lara?
I'm ready.
Okay, great. Why does it seem that all the focus is on developmental or childhood conditioning or neglect or abuse when treating adults? Isn't like shitty adult family treatment just as damaging?
Okay, so I'm going to take a wild guess and imagine that this person has been talking with a spouse who has maybe had some bad behavior.
Yeah, probably.
And has maybe mapped it back to family of origin or childhood stuff. And this is where you have to think kind of both and, right? It can't be either. It's sort of both and. And here's what I would say, because this came up in a session actually yesterday, where I was pointing out that some of the husband, the wife was feeling very intensely about something that the husband had done. And, it was poking on some wounds for her. It was poking on some childhood wounds of, I'm not good enough. And so she's feeling real intensely about it. And she had created a lot of meaning, some of which was accurate and some of which wasn't as accurate. And she did not, she took offense by the notion that, that he didn't do anything wrong, that really this was all coming from, from the past, from her, right? This is from her.
Mm-hmm.
So Here's what I would say. I would say this: when we have wounds from the past that haven't been healed, that haven't like fully been processed, and then we're kind of left with that wound, it intensifies everything. So it's both that the past stuff has happened and there's wounding there, and then that is driving bad decisions, bad behavior, ineffective ways of talking to people. That's affected, like it's affecting all of those things. And it doesn't excuse it, but it explains it.
Yeah.
So
and
you can both hold somebody accountable and also hold some compassion for the fact that, they didn't get here on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you a believer in the idea that trauma, when you talk about wounds, it has to be healed? It's never just going to go away. It might sit dormant for a while, but we actually have to get in there and roll up our sleeves and address it at some point, right? I mean, you don't just reach age 50 and all your childhood stuff is erased because you're old enough.
I mean, I think it depends on the trauma, right? And it depends on if you mean like capital T trauma or little t trauma. I do think that this is going to sound weird, but I think moving your body a lot does actually get the trauma through you.
Mm.
I have a friend who passed away recently, and he had so much trauma in his childhood, and was on a really bad path and righted himself in his 20s, late 20s. And he became a contractor, like a general contractor, somebody who builds houses. And he believes that, I mean, he died in his late 70s, but he believes he would have died a long time ago, had he not moved his body so much, as a contractor. So I think he was able to. Now, then he did a lot of like intensive trauma work afterwards, where he talked about it. But I also think you can kind of move it through you, with a lot of movement as well. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it needs to be addressed. You have to dig it all out. You have to kind of look at it, face it, um, before you stop acting out of the trauma from your childhood.
Okay, your comment about moving your body, that leads into another question that I had planned to ask later, but I'm going to ask it now because it fits and this is so interesting to me. Lara, there are so many different therapy types. If you're just like a layman like me, sure, he would say quite lame man, and you get on the Google machine and you start typing in different therapy techniques, you can read about EMDR or brain spotting or CBT or DBT, or I assume lots of other BT things. There's like dozens of therapeutic practices. And I think a lot of them are a connection to talk therapy and some kind of movement. Is that a thing? Is that something you believe in? And how does a person pick what kind of therapy to pursue with all these choices that are out there?
Oh, that's a broad question. I mean, the way I would answer it is this. There's a quote that goes something like, talk therapy is just an excuse to hang out long enough to let the relationship do the work.
Huh.
And I mostly believe that. I think that it's 70% relationship. And I think the reason the relationship is so important is that all of us have like the far reaches, the dusty little corners of our psyche and the things that have happened to us that we don't really want to share with anyone. Like they're not things that we've done that we're not proud of, that are kind of ashamed of, or things that we don't want to talk about or look at. And you have to feel safe enough with your therapist to be able to dig all of that out and bring it up. And you have to feel like when you look at them, their face is not like judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
or thinking you're a bad person or so if you
You'd be
have
terrible at that, Sherry, just for the record.
I can be empathetic.
Your
I've never
facial
experienced
expression,
that with Sherry.
her facial expressions are great, but from an entertainment standpoint, but not from a safety standpoint necessarily. Like that
I
one right
think you have
there.
a
I'm
quite
sorry, go ahead.
empathetic face.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think it's mostly relationship, but then there's, I mean, they're of those things that you just said are specific to like EMDR is a great way to be able to both use your body because it's about eye movement or bilateral tapping or bilateral stimulation in order to kind of like contain the trauma so that you don't feel like you're just like letting all the trauma out and you can't find a way to kind of like contain it. And DBT is for people who have really big emotions and need ways to figure out how to kind of regulate or bring those emotions in. I mean, all of them have utility, but I think the relationship is the most important thing.
What do you mean when you say like just talk long enough so the relationship can do the work? Are you talking about the relationship between the person and their therapist?
Yep.
So like they get enough comfort, direction, advice, probing questions from the therapist that is where the healing comes from?
It's the sense that you can say anything regardless of how outrageous or
Okay.
shameful or ridiculous it might seem, and your therapist is going to accept you And I mean, nobody likes to hear this word, but I use it, love you regardless. And so I think that's the important thing, is that relationship. And if you feel that way, then you're willing to kind of explore some of those things and face some of the things. You got somebody there to help you do that. I mean, obviously therapists have to have a little bit of, they have the ability to ask the kind of the right questions, to be able to challenge in ways that are helpful, to be able to empathize when empathy is required. So that's like sort of the art form. But the relationship, how you feel with them, whether you feel emotionally safe enough to be able to say all the things, that's the important thing.
So it sounds to me like if somebody is seeing a therapist and it doesn't feel like a good fit, it's worthwhile to explore that right away and find a better fit, because the relationship with the therapist is more important than the letters behind their name or the plaques on the wall. Like you got to feel connected to that person.
And if you're revisiting trauma and your therapist doesn't have an empathetic reaction or doesn't have a comforting reaction, you could be re-traumatizing yourself as well.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, it's just like shopping, kind of psychiatric medication. A lot of it is very individual. And so you have to try things that, and the same thing with therapists. You have to sort of shop around and make sure that you're with the therapist that works for you. And that's very individual, right? Who works for you.
One of the big takeaways for me from grad school was this idea of pathologizing. When we feel compelled to label everything and tell somebody, this is your diagnosis, this is the thing you have, it actually makes us feel worse about ourselves than if we just treat your experiences as experiences. And, obviously, unless there are extreme versions of this, but for the most part, yeah, you just have a normal expression of your sexuality or your relationship or whatever it might be. As soon as we label it and give you this painful diagnosis, it actually gives you a deeper hole to dig out of. That's one of the things that I learned. And so you talking about, being receptive as a therapist to whatever's being told to you and not shaming the person for having that experience, it strikes me as the same thing. It makes a ton of sense to me.
And to that point, sort of, I've seen that cut both directions. So I think that labels can be pathologizing, but I think they can also be really healing. And I'll give you a couple of examples. If you have suffered with attention deficit disorder your entire life and you got diagnosed as an adult, the sense of relief that you have of knowing that your brain is just different and that you're not lazy and you're not stupid and that you're not just unmotivated as you've been told your entire life, that can feel so validating. So that's one thing, the validation part of it. But the second thing is like something like ADHD, which is like, there, I don't know, tons and tons of books written about it. Lots of people have experiences. Like all of a sudden you start to feel like, oh, there's some tools that I can use to deal with this. So I think as long as you're, you don't think of it as a disorder, because that's what it's called, right? Attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. If you don't think of it as a pathology, I think there can be a lot of benefit to having a diagnosis. The other one that comes to mind is autism, particularly if you're being diagnosed as an adult. Just like everything makes sense. It's like I heard one point that somebody said at their autism diagnosis, they felt like they were present at their own birth.
Oh, yeah.
Witnessing their own birth, because it just felt like, oh, that makes so much sense. So it's very validating to feel like there's a reason that you are the way you are.
Yeah.
What a great response. That's why this is called Ask Lara, not Ask Matt.
Yeah. Well, I agree with Lara saying that like knowledge is power. You have a name for something that you didn't know what was going on inside your body, inside your brain. And so now you have these tools. So I love that description. Yours, not so much. Yeah. But my question is it important to understand like the attachment styles? I feel like there's that little bit of that. There was a resurgence of this and like is there a compatible attachment style, or is there an incompatible, or is it just the way you manage the relationship? And how does that affect relationships long term?
I think attachment style, like that was one of the things I read the book Hold Me Tight, which I don't know if you guys have read, but that's Sue Johnson's book. And it felt like the world cracked open a little bit for me. I mean, I think attachment styles are so important to know about yourself because it tells you what you're going to do when you're feeling scared. And our primary relationship is scary because it's really, really important. And so if we feel like it's threatened, or we feel like our partner is going to abandon us or isn't going to love us anymore, I mean, we feel scared. So the attachment style, if you identified it for yourself, then you have a pretty good sense of what it is that you do. If you're anxious, you tend to pull in and pursue. If you are avoidant, you tend to push away. And and then if you have a fearful attachment, then you have a whole panoply of things that you can do. Secure people will kind of hang with it a little bit, just because it doesn't feel quite as threatening. Anyway, all that to say, I think it's really useful to know what your attachment style is and your partner's, because then you don't have to take their actions so personally. You don't have to feel offended that they're pulling away from you and apply a bunch of like interpretation and meaning onto that, because that's what they do when they're upset or scared. And the same thing from them to you. Does that help?
Yes.
I think it helps a lot.
I had a recent situation that if you had been able to remember my attachment style and put that into practice and place, and knowing where I was in that grieving process, maybe it would have helped us get over a little bit more of a rough thing. I'm not trying to drop you in the grief.
No, it's okay.
But then I knew I was doing it, but I really didn't know, like in the grief-filled moments, a few days after finding out my mother had passed, like how you really like kind of roll out of that. And then like your support system is also grieving, and there's also all this that you needed to work on, with arrangements. And so it's just, I think it's really nice to know like what's going to be the default, and that he didn't need to take it so personally that I was being a little standoffish, or defensive, or, in that grief. But I think that's very important. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Clarity.
Well, and it also gives you something, in times like that where the emotions are running high, there's so much to do. Your support structure is also grieving. So it's not like they can pour all of you don't have that kind of, you can't borrow from everyone else's nervous system because everyone is a little bit of a wreck. All of your tendencies are going to be exacerbated. So everything will be worse. If you're a person who needs distance in order to regulate, you're not going to be able to pull in, and you're not going to have the energy to do it. But when you're talking interpersonally, a lot of times that pushing away really does create distance in your relationship. And so knowing that that's your attachment style, like, can kind of indicate to you that you want to lean in, you want to push against that a little bit, in the same way that Matt, I'm guessing you might have a different attachment style than Sherry.
Yeah, I don't know what I have. I know what hers is. I don't know what mine is. I like to be attached. Mine's barnacle. My attachment style is barnacle.
So you would be like, so we call it pursue, withdraw. There's a pursue, withdraw pattern. So Matt, you'd be the pursuer, and Sherry would be the withdrawer.
Yeah, it's a constant chase. Yeah.
And then when she withdraws, you're like, hey, how come you're not talking with me? And then you're like, bang, 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 bang on her door.
Well, I think
in there, everything all right?
While we're digging in here, I think it often depends quite a bit on how I'm feeling myself. If I'm in a good place, self-esteem, self-confidence wise, and I'm pursuing and she's running the other direction, I'm like, oh well,
Yeah.
But if I'm feeling terrible and I'm pursuing and she's running the other way, that feels awful.
Yeah. So you either, and this is the other thing that I probably believe that not every person believes, which is I think that you have two different attachment styles. One that like kind of went with each parent. So you have a primary one with your primary caregiver, and then you have a secondary one, and I think you
Oh,
on them. So I don't think that, one thing is what we always do, which is why it can be confusing sometimes.
Mhm.
So Matt, when you're at your most kind of threatened and scared, you are like a big time pursuer. Otherwise, like you can feel pretty stable, like just letting Sherry work it out and come back to you
yeah.
when she's ready. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And which is what made the whole situation with Sherry's mom's passing, the stuff that piled on top that made it interesting is we had a gas leak and the gas company came out and put a padlock on our meter and locked us out of our gas until it got fixed. So no heat, no hot water. Um, and then my phone stopped outward texting I could receive but not send. And then my computer keyboard stopped working. And so obviously Sherry's mom's passing was the most significant by 1,000-fold. But then there were all these little annoying things happening too. And not losing my shit was harder than it's been in years and years and years. And so yeah.
Mhm.
So
So
I
yeah,
have
I was looking for comfort when she wanted to pull away and
and
process.
she didn't have much comfort to give at that point. She was plumb
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
And she was in the right too. And I knew it.
So I
So
have a way of thinking about what you're talking about. And I know this is not really a visual format because most people
oh,
are listening.
that's
So
right.
I'll try to describe it, but some people will know about the window of tolerance. Do you guys know about the window of tolerance?
No, but I'm excited.
Oh, you're excited. Okay. So, and I have a presentation on this. So,
I
but
just, for people listening, I just slammed the window shut. I was like, yes, that's the avoidant
no window
attachment.
for you.
Sherry's is called the
Not
window,
a crack.
the window of intolerance. Is what Sherry calls it.
Okay, so imagine, if you will, a bar that's green that goes like
Okay.
kind of horizontally across. And then on top of that bar is a red bar. And then below that is a blue bar. Okay. So the green bar is your window of tolerance. And you've got a line that kind of goes up and down, but it stays inside the window of tolerance. So that represents your nervous system and your nervous system activity. So you can have things that happen to you throughout the day. You get cut off in traffic, you find out a friend's ill, you have an irritating conversation with your colleague. It changes like the activity level in your nervous system. But if your window of tolerance is nice and wide, it kind of stays inside that green area, which means you can think and you can feel at the same time, right? You're not acting out of impulse. You're able to think and feel at the same time. But
Okay.
sometimes when we have a lot of stressful things happen, or we are predisposed to an anxiety response, we end up in the red zone, which is called hyperarousal. So hyperarousal looks like, anxiety, could be anger. It's a little chaotic. It's sort of frazzled energy. It's basically your nervous system is amped up, and a lot of people
Okay.
get stuck up there in hyperarousal. And it's hard for them to get back down into the window of tolerance. So that's actually like an anxiety disorder when you kind of get stuck up in the red zone. But some people are predisposed to a depressed response, or they end up here in that like hyperarousal for too long and their nervous system shuts down and they go down into hypoarousal. So hypoarousal can look like passivity, numbness, depression, kind of lethargy, withdrawal, dissociation. Those are all like that's shut down nervous system. So that's hypoarousal. Okay. So are you with me? You're still with me in terms of my
Yes. It's great. I love this.
okay. So the thing is, your window of tolerance changes. The size of your window of tolerance changes all the time. And so somebody who, yesterday had a nice wide window of tolerance, today, because of lack of sleep or a lot of other things, can have a really narrow, skinny little window of tolerance. And so that means that like your nervous system is doing the same thing, right? You get cut off in traffic, it's doing the same exact thing, but because your window of tolerance is so narrow, you're popping out. You're popping out into hyperarousal, or you're popping down into hypoarousal. Or you're zigzagging back and forth between those two things. So when you tell that story about the funeral, first of all, poor Sherry, her window of tolerance is like this big, right?
Right.
Right? Like too many things going on, too many stressful things, lots of grief. And then just like family everywhere and travel and everything. Window of tolerance is like this big. And Matt, I'm sure you were like, I've got this. I can be the like supportive spouse. I'm coming in, I'm riding in with my like nice wide window of tolerance, and then the gas, the keyboard, the, like, the email, and your window of tolerance got super narrow also. And
Yes.
of course you want to rely on each other because you're used to like looking to each other for support and soothing, and neither of you has the ability to do that in that situation.
That is so helpful. That is such a helpful visual.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's exactly what happened.
Oh, yeah.
I did. I was like, I got this. I'm going to be your knight in shining armor, your shoulder to cry on. I'll deflect any family drama. Like, I got this. And then, what is that? Oh, we don't have gas supplied to our house. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and what's interesting is,
Yeah. Yeah. And, there were just all other like weird little things that were going on, the decisions that need to be made. That was just like decision fatigue. And, so it's just, you just have like no ability to listen to anyone else complain when you have such a low window of tolerance. That's why when you said that, that's why I was like shutting it down. Like, nope, I can't hear you complain about one more thing. I'm going to go to the neighbors and shower. Got no fucking gas. Gonna go, no hot water.
Yeah.
Gonna go stand in her hot shower for a while.
That was kind of funny. There's three of us in the house, Sherry and I and our 15-year-old son. The way we handled no hot water, Sherry went to the neighbors and showered. I just didn't shower for 3 days. And the 15-year-old wrestler took cold showers for 3 days and loved it.
Are you saying that the gas was shut off for days?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like we did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Days. But anyhow.
Talk about pride. Yeah.
We just, no furnace. Yeah. No furnace. I did like borrow a couple of space heaters just to heat up a room, like while we were working and stuff. But, like days.
That's rough.
Yeah.
We're going to thank our sponsors, but I know listeners, you're going to want to stick with us and come back, because while Laura has much better information to share than I do, she shares my penchant for the dramatic. She has already said that her world cracked open and told a story where someone said they felt like they witnessed their own birth. Her descriptors are great, and we're going to hear more of those as she answers the rest of our questions. But first, let us tell you that we are sponsored by SoberLink. SoberLink is the premier remote alcohol monitoring system, combining cutting-edge technology with compassionate design to support accountability in recovery and family law. Sherry, SoberLink is not the solution.
Wait, you mean SoberLink is the solution?
No, you heard me right the first time. SoberLink is not the solution.
We're getting paid to promote SoberLink, so I don't know what you're doing here.
Well, I'm just telling it like it is. If you think that a piece of tech, even the best-in-class, top-of-the-line tech like SoberLink, is going to solve your alcohol or communication or trust problem for you, it will not. No device can do that. But if you are looking for an important, reliable, dependable, proven part of the solution, SoberLink is right for you. I wish I had known about SoberLink when I was trying to get sober or when I was trying to regain your trust. Sometimes I stayed sober and accountable through sheer willpower and determination, but sometimes that wasn't enough, and I needed to use my tools like eating something or getting hydrated or getting out in nature or reading about alcoholism. Other times, I needed to talk to someone who understood, and still other times, I needed to play it all the way forward and think about the repercussions of drinking. Even with all of that, I could have used more help. It took me 10 years and a lot of relapses to get sober and rebuild the trust with you. If I had SoberLink and I knew that a scheduled test was taking place and they were taking place on regular daily intervals, I know I would have gotten sober sooner and our communication and trust would have improved exponentially. Sometimes I just needed to know someone was watching to keep me making the right next decision.
Right now, SoberLink is offering Untoxicated podcast listeners a free offer, ID valid for $100 enrollment bonus. You can grab your offer ID now while this offer is still valid.
That is a $100 enrollment bonus for SoberLink's best-in-class service and product combination with built-in facial recognition and tamper detection, expert in-house support, email daily, weekly, or monthly reporting that's court admissible in all 50 states and Canada, unlimited testing days, and scheduled testing to build accountability and trust.
Claim your offer ID for a $100 enrollment bonus. There is no commitment required to claim your offer ID while this promotion lasts, and you can use your $100 enrollment bonus when you're ready to place your order. To claim your offer ID, you will only be asked to provide your name and email address, no personal details, no commitment, and no credit card. To claim your offer ID for your $100 enrollment bonus, please go to soberlink.com/untoxicated.
If you have experienced secondhand alcoholism,
Like me, you're the loved one of an alcoholic,
then please choose which of these ways you are ready to help end the suffering.
Are you sick of walking around on eggshells with a constantly activated nervous system?
You know, it's not healthy to be stuck in fight or flight.
I know. Don't you think I know that?
Yes, I suppose you do. Are you fed up with the culture that normalizes a toxic carcinogen in a bottle as the answer to stress, celebration, socializing, and mourning?
Are you sick of watching your partner drink alone in the garage or in a basement, or while they don't think you're paying any attention, making you feel crazy, like you're the alcohol police?
Are you sick of being told by your partner in a sick culture that you are the one with the drinking problem because you can't relax and stop acting like a control freak?
Are you crushed under the weight of anger and resentment, hopelessness, frustration, confusion, with nowhere to turn for support?
If you checked a few of those boxes, we need your help in our Echoes of Recovery think tank. Don't sit on the sidelines and hope someone else fixes the secondhand effects of alcoholism. Be part of something special. Join us in crushing the stigma and helping people grow.
You just might help yourself in the process.
To find out if you belong in Echoes of Recovery, please take our 1-minute quiz at echoesofrecovery.org.
We need you. Do you need us? Echoesofrecovery.org.
All right, Lara, welcome back. We have another listener question for you. Is resentment processing necessary for trust and reconnection in a relationship after addiction? This person says, my spouse is 6 years sober, and we are certainly doing much better than in early sobriety. He does AA and he sees a counselor, but he's not shown a willingness to process my resentments with me. I've done a lot of resentment processing with Echoes of Recovery, but I still find my mindset is stuck, especially when it comes to intimacy. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that person kind of answered their own question because it is really hard, I think, to open up all of the parts of your marriage, even when you're on the right track, without fully processing all of the impacts of the alcoholism. And so resentment processing is a bit of a tough term. You know, I mean, right? Like it's a bit of a tough turn because like,
I don't know. We use it all the time. What do you mean? Tell us, help us.
It just like, it has the sense that the person who's going to receive the processing is gonna kind of get bashed over the head with a bunch of anger. And I'm not saying anger is not valid. Obviously, there's a lot of things to be angry about, but there's a lot of emotions that are packed in there. It's not just anger. It's also sadness. It is fear. There's so much impact. I mean, in fact, if we could just go back to like the window of tolerance, like most people who have lived with an alcoholic know that their nervous system gets super fried and they end up in that like either hyper arousal where they just feel super amped up all the time, or shut down in that like kind of blue hypo arousal, depression, kind of fatigue, withdrawal zone. So there's a lot of impact. It's really important. I wonder if we could rebrand it a bit, the resentment processing.
Let's hear your idea.
It might need a little bit of a makeover in order to make it appealing to all parties. Because like in the case that you just read, this is somebody who does not believe that their sex life can be revitalized without having some of this out in the open. which I think is completely warranted and valid. And so impact processing, that doesn't,
Okay.
I don't know what, okay, let me ask you, because Matt, it's kind of your term, isn't it? The resentment processing, or is it yours, Sherry?
Well, we got that from a friend of Matt's who played soccer with him years ago. And it wasn't that it was an addictive relationship in recovery, but they just had bricks of resentments, little things that maybe happened throughout the week that they needed to kind of go over and make sure it didn't build a resentment or it wasn't overlooked or it was right.
But he's English and he uses the C word in polite conversation. So
So brass.
so his
By the way,
word choice
that-
has never been applauded, you know?
Yeah, apparently that's a great thing to call your friend these days. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
the younger generation. So
Oh, charming.
I'm not
Charming.
gonna use it.
Yeah.
But
we'll be aware of that.
impact processing, yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah, I could see that.
Okay, so maybe what I need to do is like back up a little bit and ask. So Matt, tell me a little bit, or Sherry, tell me a little bit about what exactly resentment processing is, because I think a take on it that's probably different than what you're talking about. So
Okay.
let me back up and get that information.
So Sherry's right. It does come from a guy I used to play soccer with, but I think as we've thought about it over the years, one of the areas where we find it to be effective is specifically in contrast to what they do in the 12 steps, the amends process in the 12 steps, because we meet a lot of people who are the partners of an alcoholic and they have been on the receiving end of an amends, which is just this person kind of laying out all the harms they think they've done and then kind of doing the I'm washing my hands of this motion, saying I'm sorry and let's never talk about this again. And then the person that's on the receiving end of that, that's completely insufficient because they haven't done any expressing at all. All they've done is hear about this person's perception of their own ills and missteps. And so resentment processing for Sherry and I specifically, it was when Sherry would tell me about something that happened from her perspective. And, when I'm doing it right, I'm acknowledging the pain and suffering that she went through and not trying to explain it away. I was an over apologizer. So Sherry was never looking for more apologies. She was looking for acknowledgement and validation, because in the moment, or like the day after something would happen, I would downplay everything, right? I would say, oh yeah, I drank a little too much, but it wasn't as bad as you're saying it was. You're overblowing it. And so to acknowledge, yeah, it actually was really bad. Yes, Sherry, please add.
And also for me, like the blanket apologies, I'm sorry I did that last night. Let's forget about it.
Yeah.
Never acknowledging that I had feelings and emotions and I had things that I need to process and I wasn't allowed to. And then when I did, be like, well, I said I was sorry, or we don't need to relive the past again. So I was never able to verbally process with the person that I felt like had done me wrong or misstepped, and it caused, a bunch of like bad moments and behaviors and reactions. So I never got to feel like I was able to have my say of how something really happened and took place from the sober moment. So I would feel very stifled, and that would cause resentment in me. And I think we use the word resentment processing because I will hold a grudge forever.
Grand champion. She's good.
Noted.
Yes.
Noted.
But sadly, you do need to process that, and you need to like be acknowledged, and you need to be validated that to get rid of that resentment. So I I was a stuffer. So I would stuff these feelings down, and I was very resentful of all the things. I was resentful, like how he can get away with this blanket lame ass apology, and I'm supposed to just forget everything. So for me, it was a resentment.
Yeah.
So that's why I think we kind of come up with the resentment process.
And I think it's a kind of a both and, really. Like, it's very important for the spouse to be able to get all of this stuff off their chest, to be able to say and not have it like cut short with a blanket apology or a too quick apology, because honestly, like listening to someone, the impact on your spouse of your behavior is so shame inducing that like a lot of people will shut down. They just don't have the capacity, like the emotional regulation capacity, to be able to hold space for that until they've been sober for a really long time. And then, if they've done a bunch of emotional work, right? Because it takes that as well. But also, I think that the person who's been who was drinking has a lot to talk about. And if you don't have both of those sides of the conversation, but it can't be, so I have this metaphor, lots of metaphors. So, and they're all visual. So I'm sorry, this is not really a visual medium, but like my metaphor is like, conversations are like a game of catch, right? And so so let's say you've got purple guy on one side and he has purple balls, and you've got yellow guy on the other side and they have yellow balls, right? And so like conversations are, purple throws his ball and yellow throws the purple ball back to say, I understand, I got it. And you know what?
Okay.
I got something to add. So he throws a yellow ball, and then purple throws that one back saying, yeah, I understand what you're saying. So those kinds of conversations are great until someone gets offended
Mm-hmm.
or the emotional temperature starts to rise, at which point you can't play catch anymore. It has to turn into pitching practice. And pitching practice is one person shares, the other person listens, very structured. And the person listening really needs to not take it personally, not get defensive, not ask questions that are about them and what they did, but ask questions about their partner. And those are all really, really, really hard skills, even for people who've not been traumatized, who are not shut down in shame. So all I'm saying is, for those of you who've been able to do this, like, hats off. It is very hard work. But I think it's really worthwhile, right? I mean, this is how you revitalize your relationship. This is how you get your sex life back. It's, but I will say that it takes a lot. So having somebody to help you do that, like a couples counselor, is really useful.
It does take a lot. I think I'm turning more and more hardcore the further I get away from my own active addiction. Because when you said, to hear about the impact that, say, my drinking had on Sherry, when you describe that as being very shame inducing, my like gut reaction to that, Laura, is, oh yeah, well, if you can't do the time, then don't commit the crime. Like if you're gonna be emotionally abusive of your partner, which is what a lot of alcoholic behavior really is, it's emotional abuse. If you're gonna do that, then you better be willing to listen to it. And I know that sounds very unempathetic, especially from someone who was an emotional abuser as a drunk. But I do respect what you're saying about it takes a long time in sobriety and recovery before you get to the point where you can do it. But I think it's an aspirational goal that we should set for people right away. They should understand, listen, this is where you're going in your relationship. Like, intimacy isn't coming back until you fix this. It might take you a while, but you got to get there.
Yeah, we did it like with something, like it's had to start out small, quote unquote crimes, or so it wasn't like we just dove in for
Here's the very worst thing that ever happened.
Hours on end. But we had also been kind of practicing it even when Matt was still drinking. We were kind of doing that. So we had kind of gotten in that habit of like one person listening and receiving the information and not taking it personal, not Darvo, not asking the questions how it impact, like you said, how it impacted, the perpetrator. But so we were kind of already in that state of mind, but we never started like just like 3 or 4 things. And it was a slow, long process. That's for sure.
And I think you guys did it the right way by starting small. But I think, Matt, I think you were very motivated to do this. Am I wrong about that? Like, you were not shying away from this because you like all the words. Like, of the two of you, you're the one who likes the words the most, right? Like, when you're talking and you're communicating, you're feeling connected. So you're motivated to like begin that process and hear from her and be there because that felt to you like you could connect with her in that way, and also kind of receive some of that pain. Like, it was almost penance seems like the wrong word, but
I mean, I think we're scratching around the edges. For me, one of the most impactful moments of our relationship was when I figured out, and I don't think you just said the words, but I figured out that she didn't like me. She loved me. I was the father of her children. We were financially tied together. So it was beyond, it was when I was well sober. It was beyond the point where I was in imminent risk of her turning on her heels and taken off out of town. Um, but I realized, oh my gosh, I'm cohabitating and I'm married to someone who doesn't like me. And I said, well, to me, that was unacceptable. Like I want her to like me. I don't want her to just put up with me because she's got no other choice. And so that was the motivator for me. Do I get comfort from conversation? Yeah, I suppose that's fair. That's definitely fair. But when you talk about it being shame inducing, I experienced that. Like the first time we went through some of the more tough examples of my bad alcoholic behavior. I mean, it was gut wrenching, and I didn't want to be in the room. But I did want my wife to like me again, and I knew if she didn't have the outlet to do that, then it was hopeless.
Yeah. Well, and I think it helps to be motivated, but I do think it makes sense to recognize that there are a lot of people who are on the other side of or who are on the sober side of this process,
Mm-hmm.
who are not used to sharing much about themselves, who are not as like comfortable with the emotions and the vulnerability, and in all of that is required. Like it is an enormous growth process that as like a couple, you can really push yourself. You can push that growth in each other. And I think it's really important. I also would say that I think it's probably also important for the drinker to be able to say more about their experience. More about like what it was like for them. You know, both the euphoria and the panic afterwards, the feelings of not being in control, the feelings of being able to whatever it is, like some of that would be really, I think, hard for a spouse to hear. Because like they feel like they're the harmed party. But in the interest of both people being able to feel totally seen and understood, and that's really what you're talking about. I
Yeah.
think that's important also.
Well, I like the way you describe it as pitching practice, because the way we did it early on and the way we suggest it to other people early on is the response to what your partner is sharing should be really limited to kind of, wow, that sounds hard. Something in that area.
Or recap what you're hearing.
Yeah,
But even that,
absolutely.
people aren't so great at that sometimes.
Yeah, I actually learned that from my daughter not long ago, and how impactful that can be. But not explaining it away, not, oh well, I did that because, or but you don't understand how much stress I was under, that just acknowledging, and one thing each. I say one thing and you say one thing, because you're right. Like
Yeah, I
we
listen
do
too.
both have to have the opportunity to share. It's really important that if Sherry shares something, that when it's my turn, the thing I share isn't a counter argument to the thing she shared. It's really helpful if it's a totally different event, experience, emotion.
Well, and the counter, so you can say it as a counter thing, but you have to do it like, when this happened, here was my experience. Not here's why I did it. This is my justification. This is my excuse. But like, this was my experience during this. If you're telling
Yeah.
stories about what's happening within you, that's always valid because you're the only one who knows that. And it is really opening up and letting your partner in. But yes, there's a lot. This is ripe. This entire thing is ripe for it to go wrong. Which is why it's a difficult thing to do, and it's kind of like an advanced skill, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah,
have to have some
absolutely.
like sobriety under your belt. You need to be able to emotionally regulate. You need to have a good sense of who you are and what your strengths are, as well as your weaknesses. You need to be able to support yourself internally, and you need to have like stability in your life and in your world, or else like like we were talking about the funeral, right? That was an unstable situation for lots of reasons. you don't want to throw resentment processing on top of something like that,
No.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I was
sorry,
just ask, like,
Me too.
so if the resentment processing isn't happening and it has been long-term sobriety, is there a way, and they've done resentment processing as the partner in other areas, is there a way to kind of get that unstuck feeling out to move forward if you maybe encounter the partner that's in recovery just unable to go there? Is that what you were going to ask?
Well, yeah, let me throw a little twist on this, because you and I were pointing to the same part of the question.
Uh-huh.
I think it's really interesting that she says she especially has trouble getting back into intimacy. And I'm wondering if that can be because that's her most vulnerable, most sacred gift. And she's like, hey, this guy won't, he won't talk about his thing. He won't show me any vulnerability. Why would I show him vulnerability? Do you think that's why intimacy is the thing that has the most trouble holding back on?
I mean, maybe that seems like a good guess to me. I think that intimacy and wanting to be intimate with somebody is such a complicated thing, and you actually, have a master's degree in this, so I'll give that over to you to be able to answer. But I think that many people, if they don't feel safe with their partner, they're not going to want to have sex with them. And
Yes.
if you've got all of these things that your partner can't hear from you, well, then you don't feel very safe with them. You don't feel like they really understand you. You don't feel like you can be authentically yourself. And by authentic, I don't mean like berate them but really like, share all of you with them. So yeah, I mean, it makes complete sense to me that she wouldn't want to share that with him or them if she hasn't been able to really, share all of these thoughts that she has.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. That safety component, I think there's a gender component to it as well. I think the fact that the person that's sharing this concern is female and her husband, who doesn't want to talk about anything but does still want to have sex, I think that very much conforms to kind of the majority position. Not to say that it can't go, you can't be the opposite. It certainly can, but that you're right. The word you use, safety, I think makes the most is super important. Makes a ton of sense. Okay, let's do one more question, and then I want to come back to the window of tolerance and ask a question about that. But the final question that we'll ask for this first Ask Laura episode, and this is something we hear a lot. So when we got this question from a listener, I was like, oh yeah, got to make sure we ask this one. How common do you think it is that there's an actually diagnosable condition that's being masked by alcoholism, something like borderline personality disorder or actual real narcissism, not just, internet psychology narcissism? How often is that the case, maybe in what you see in your practice, versus, once the alcohol gets out of the way, there are some underlying issues, but there's not actually a diagnosable condition? Because we meet a lot of people that are like, oh, my husband's sober, but he's still an asshole. Like, is he just an asshole, or does he need to go to a doctor and be diagnosed for the type of asshole he is?
I mean, I can't really speak to the diagnosis part because all of those to me exist on a spectrum, right? So like all of us have some bits of narcissism about us. It's just that people who are diagnosable with narcissistic personality disorder, it's actually like impacting their life, their degree of narcissism. But I will say this. Yeah, I believe that generally speaking, alcoholism, in addition to other unhealthy coping strategies, are masking an inability, like an unhealthy emotional state. And I think like if you have a lot of either stress or mental health issues or an inability to kind of adapt to your environment well, which is generally the personality disorders, it shows up in one of 5 ways and sometimes all 5. So I'll go through them really quick because they're fast and they are totally understandable. So one is obviously your emotional health. So like you're anxious, you're depressed, you're both anxious and depressed, so, other kinds of mental health issues, but that's number one, emotional health. The second one is physical health. So a lot of times the stress will come out in physical symptoms. You'll have stomach aches, you'll have headaches, you'll have tension everywhere. I had a client who couldn't use her legs for a while because of the stress that was happening in her life. The third thing is that it affects your relationships. So your relationships are not good. You can't seem to stay married to the same person, or you're having fights with your kids or blowing up at them or whatever. That's relationships. The next one is daily functioning. So your ability to kind of get out of bed, brush your teeth, clean your environment, go to work, do all the things. And the final one is you've adopted some unhealthy coping strategies. So alcoholism is just one of those unhealthy coping strategies. And of course, alcohol works great to suppress those emotions for a while until it starts to have the kickback of having lots of consequences to the rest of your life. So yeah, I think of alcoholism as being a way to cope that has gone really wrong, and that has impacted the rest of your life. And it's hard to know until the alcohol's out of the picture what you're really dealing with. A lot of times it is undiagnosed ADHD, or undiagnosed anxiety gone nuts, or OCD, or lots of other things. There could be diagnosable conditions, but it could also just be really, everybody kind of knows this sort of factoid, which is your kind of emotional maturity and growth stops at the point that you start drinking. So that just means that when you start drinking, let's say you're, we'll be generous and say you're 16 when you start drinking. Yikes. None of us want to have to deal with this adult world with the emotional maturity of a 16-year-old. You just don't have the capacity to be able to be brave and flexible and to face things and to feel uncomfortable emotions and to deal with the stuff that we have to deal with. So I think it's always hard, because once you kind of put the alcohol aside, then you're not cured. Now you got to figure out what was it that you were avoiding feeling?
Yeah.
And how do you go about that with the emotional maturity of a 13-year-old?
It's really interesting to hear you kind of validate that factoid, because I've said it a lot of times, but I say a lot of things that are loosely tethered to the truth. But it's interesting to hear a mental health professional. So you do buy that whole idea that we stop maturing emotionally when we're using a maladaptive coping mechanism to not have to mature, right? To just glaze through things without the actually handling them in an emotionally mature way. That's a thing.
I will say this, many people don't begin alcoholic style drinking until later in life. When they are drinking earlier, they are not using it to mask emotion or to numb emotion. Many people are, but some people are not. So I think it's really divided between people who are using it specifically to numb out emotionally. Those folks have never really dealt with their emotions. But if you are drinking along and you're still feeling your emotions, and your alcoholic style drinking happens later, meaning that you begin to drink in order to handle emotions, I think those people probably have done a lot of emotional processing and maturing. So I don't think it's a black and white situation necessarily. I think that there's some gray area there, but so that probably doesn't really, you're not loving that explanation.
No, it's directionally correct to say it. And for me, that's always good enough. Let's go back to the window of tolerance. I love the way you described it. You did a good job doing radio instead of television. However, your website, you do a lot of illustrating. Do you have an illustration of the window of tolerance on your website?
I don't know, but that's a great, I'll do my next blog post will be about the window of tolerance. How about that?
There you go. Your website is laurahammockTherapy.com. We will link that in the show notes. You have a lot of really cool resources and tools, some that we've actually covered on episodes of the podcast in the past, which we, again, episode 312, we recommend listeners go back and listen to. If you have questions, listeners, for Laura, for obviously now you have she's shown her chops, as I think they say, or as maybe we should never say again. But she knows her stuff. And so if you want to, and you're questioning whether your facial expressions are priceless or not, you should check out the YouTube video of this episode to see Sherry roll her eyes. I'm surprised they're not on the floor. You need to pick them up.
For the back of my head.
If you'd like to ask Lara a question, you can even make up a new Gmail address and send it to me completely anonymously. Not that I would ever out you or use your email address, but if you just don't trust me, which I get, send us an email and we will ask Lara next quarter, the next time we do this. Questions should be directed to matt@soberandunashamed.com. And again, check out laurahemmocktherapy.com. Lara, thank you so much for being on. We can't wait to see you again in a few months.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you.